Milan, February 2026. Snapshot. Alysa stands on the Olympic ice gold, weighing down her neck arena lights dancing off the metal. Up in the stands, her dad is losing it, tears streaming, total breakdown. Cameras eat it up, social media turns him into a viral clip in seconds. But look closer, there's a ghost in that picture. No mother, not beside her, not in the background, nobody there to dry the tears. It didn't spark a scandal. It didn't even trend. It just hung there quiet. But for the fans who've been watching Alysa for years, that silent question came roaring back. Who raised her? Because the answer isn't a straight line, and it definitely didn't start in Clovis, California back in 2005. It started way before that. Arthur wasn't built by a normal life. He fled China after the chaos of Tiananmen in '89. He hit the States with nothing and built a life from the dirt up. No safety net, no rich uncle, just grit and a stubborn refusal to quit. He grinded his way to becoming an immigration attorney in California. Steady, focused, methodical. That matters. Guys who rebuild from zero don't do things halfway. By the early 2000s, Arthur made a call. He wanted a legacy. He didn't wait for a wife or perfect timing. He chose fatherhood. Deliberate, strategic. 5 kids, all via anonymous donors and surrogates. Alysa landed on August 8, 2005. Her sister Selena came next, then the triplets Joshua, Justin and Julia. Same dad, no public mother on the birth certificate. Now this is where most documentaries hit the brakes to give you a lecture on surrogacy. But that misses the point. Biology isn't why people stare at the empty spot next to her father. They're reacting to the optic. The single dad ringside loud taking up all the oxygen in the room. He owned that single father brand. The interviews leaned into it. The media loved it. It was clean, heroic, and easy to sell. But behind closed doors, it wasn't a solo act. When Alysa was born, Arthur was married to a woman named Yanqing Mary Shin. She became the legal guardian to that pack of kids and stayed in the picture even after the marriage dissolved. That's not just a fancy title. Guardianship means showing up. It means paperwork responsibility and legal standing. Yet in the highlight reels, Mary is a ghost, maybe a cameo, then poof, gone from the script. Silence isn't absence. Sometimes it just means the storytellers wanted a simpler hero. Then there's the other shadow figure, Shu, Arthur's mum, Alysa's grandmother. She flew in from China to California to help raise those 5 kids. Just imagine that apartment. 5 little ones, dawn patrol practices, school runs, and a dad building a law career. Someone had to keep the lights on. Someone had to cook, organize, and stabilize the madness. Shu went back to China when Alysa hit 13, right when her career went supernova. That kind of exit leaves a mark on a teenager that no camera lens can capture. Here's where it gets complex. Alysa never played the victim card about her childhood. Watch her interviews. She's grounded, calm, totally comfortable with her history. She's gone on record saying her dad broke it all down for her when she was 8. Zero secrets. Transparency is the glue in families like this. Kids crack under secrets, not under the truth. But logic doesn't stop the gut reaction when you see that podium shot. Where is her mother? Maybe we're asking the wrong question. Why do we demand a single face for motherhood? For Alysa, that role was crowdsourced. Genetics from a donor, pregnancy from a surrogate, legal grounding from Mary, daily survival from grandma, the spotlight from dad. It's not a scandal, it's a layered puzzle. And we haven't even touched the ice. When a 5-year-old is lacing up at 5 a.m., coaches become parents too. But that never makes the motherhood cut. Maybe it should. Stop and look at the blueprint. It's not a missing piece, it's a deliberate, unconventional fortress. And design shows intent. Rewind to 2013. Oakland Ice Center. Pitch black outside. 5:12 a.m. The digital clock glows red. Fluorescent hum, that specific rink cold that burns your lungs before sunrise. Alysa is 8. Skates looking too big for her feet. Helmet hair, twiggy arms, drilling jumps, while the rest of the world is asleep. Dad's in the bleachers. We've seen that movie. But we don't see the machinery behind the scene. The chaotic carpools, the siblings getting ready for school, the days when the flu hit the house and someone had to stay back. Arthur was a force, but he couldn't be in 2 places at once. The story likes to say, single dad did it all. But winning takes an army. Mary Yanqing Shin stayed legally bound to those kids long after the marriage ring came off. It's not theatrical, but it's exact. Legal guardianship of 5 kids isn't a gesture. It implies forever. Court papers might be dull. They don't go viral, but they anchor reality. There's a massive gap between skipping interviews and skipping a kid's daily life. And that brings us to Shu. Back in the day, Arthur's mum flew from China to California to help raise the pack. Reports pin her as the rock until Alysa hit 13. 13. That number carries weight. That's when the teenage years start pulling hard and identity starts to stretch. Friends become the world. Doubt settles in. And right as Alysa's name started lighting up national headlines, that safety net went back to China. No one made a scene about the departure. No headlines. It just happened. But a kid feels that timing in their bones. Now pull the camera back. Figure skating isn't just hard, it is expensive. You are looking at industry estimates between $20,000 and $50,000 a year. Once you tally up travel, choreography, ice time, and the costumes. And remember, that was happening while 4 other kids were growing up under the same roof. Forget the cash. Time is the real currency. Arthur was the driver, the negotiator, the logistics manager. But a home runs on more than just a schedule. Dinner has to hit the table. Someone has to check the homework. Someone has to soak up the tears after a brutal practice. Motherhood doesn't always happen at the rink. Usually it's in the kitchen, and that part never makes the highlight reel. When Alysa was crushing the US championships as a teen, landing triple axels and becoming the youngest champ in 2019, the media ate it up. Young, fearless, historic. But they hated the complexity. A messy backstory kills the vibe. So let's shift the angle. June 2022. Alysa drops a bomb. She's walking away from competition. 16 years old, and she said she was finished. She wanted the normal life school, the experiences she sacrificed. That doesn't sound like a kid running from a chaotic home. It sounds like someone who knows exactly who she is. She hit UCLA, studied psych, and trekked to Everest Base Camp with her crew. We aren't talking metaphors here. She was literally in Nepal posting proof from the mountain. From 2022 to 2024, she was off the clock. No federation, no schedule, just her. And something shifted during that break. Her vibe softened, not weaker, just grounded. Less prodigy, more human. When she laced up her skates again, it was on her terms. That kind of control doesn't come from a broken place. That comes from security. Even if her safety net looked different, here is what people miss. Alysa never complained about her origin story. She talked about learning the truth around age 8 and didn't blink. Rumor is, she already figured it out. Kids are sharp. They see the physical differences. They ask the hard questions. It all comes down to how you answer them. Truth builds a foundation. Secrets just crack the pavement. Alysa seems solid in every interview, yet the public still can't quite wrap their heads around it. The cameras love Arthur's intensity, his screaming from the stands. It's pure cinema. Mary and Shu don't fit the movie script. Quiet doesn't sell, and that skews the picture. Just because you don't see them on tape doesn't mean they aren't there. And the sport itself makes the mother role tricky. As soon as Alysa started climbing the ranks, female coaches stepped into the frame. In elite sports, coaches become the emotional anchor. They see the fear, the exhaustion, the cracks in the armor. It's not biological love, but it builds toughness. Alysa's rise didn't happen in a vacuum. It was a team effort built inside a unique home driven by a father, molded by exile and strategy alongside siblings who lived the same life but walked different roads. Yet, everyone obsesses over that one Olympic shot. No mother in sight. But maybe the frame is the problem. Maybe the lens was just pointing the wrong way. We haven't even scratched the surface of the real psychology here. The stuff buried under identity culture and headlines. That is where the story gets grey. There is a whisper whenever people talk about Alysa Liu's mother. They aren't just asking about biology. They are asking if there is a hole in her soul. That is the subtext. You see a teen girl fighting in a brutal arena. You see a father who is laser-focused, maybe even obsessive. And instinctively the audience hunts for the counterbalance. A soft place to land. But sometimes balance isn't standing next to you for the photo op. Sometimes it is internalized. Alysa came into the world on August 8, 2005 in Clovis. By 5, she was already tearing up the ice in Oakland. That path isn't an accident. It takes a rigid schedule and total dedication. And it takes nerves of steel. The ice is unforgiving. Hitting the deck hurts, and the judges are even colder. The world judges teenage girls in real time, dissecting every twitch. If her foundation had cracks, the pressure would have shattered her. But the cracks never showed. Instead, everyone obsessed over her ice-cold composure. 13 years old, landing triple axels at the 2019 Nationals, and she didn't look frantic. She didn't look like a kid begging for judges to like her. She looked solid. And that's fascinating because kids who feel unwanted usually vibrate with a different frequency. You can feel their anxiety, that desperate hunt for validation. Alysa didn't have that. Let's shift gears for a second. Alysa Liu didn't hide his process. He explicitly chose Caucasian egg donors. He wanted his kids to be biracial Chinese and white, living the American experience. People rarely analyze that choice. It wasn't a coin flip. It wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move, identity engineering. Even the timing tells a story. Early 2000s, post 9/11 America. The debates on immigration and assimilation were deafening. Arthur wasn't just making babies. He was architecting a future. There is a structural precision to it, and architecture exposes your philosophy. The man survived political chaos, rebuilt himself as an immigration lawyer, and then designed his family with intent. That isn't chaotic parenting. That is strategy. Now here is where the silence gets loud. Mary, the legal guardian. She doesn't do tearful sit-downs. She doesn't offer commentary on Alysa's childhood. That silence left a void, allowing the public to write her out of the script. But silence can be a shield. Complex families, divorce, surrogacy, 5 kids often have unspoken pacts about privacy, especially when one kid becomes a national icon. The figure skating world hates complexity. Simple stories move merchandise. The single dad and his prodigy. It's a perfect package. Yet even back in the early days, reporters knew about her grandmother Shu. She lived with them for years before heading back to China when Alysa was 13. 13, right before the spotlight turned blinding. You have to wonder what that emotional shift cost her. No dramatic headlines, no public meltdowns, just another clean performance. Fast forward to 2022. Alysa retires at 16. That shockwave was bigger than any jump she ever landed. She'd just crushed it at the Beijing Olympics, looked totally composed. Then she walked away, said she was just done. She wanted a normal life. That statement lands heavy. Elite athletes don't quit at their peak unless the machinery inside feels broken. But pay attention to what she didn't say. She didn't trash her father. She didn't sound bitter about her upbringing. She didn't paint her childhood as a prison. She called it a choice. Then she went to UCLA, studied psychology, made real friends, hiked to Everest Base Camp in 2023. That climb wasn't a metaphor. It was literal. Proof of physical grit miles away from a frozen rink. And over those 2 years, her vibe changed. She stood differently, less guarded, warmer. That warmth didn't come from finding a long-lost mother. It came from expanding her own soul. Here is the tension. Society expects donor kids to have some identity crisis. But Alysa's public face refuses to play that role. Maybe the transparency worked. Maybe that unconventional home was steady enough that biology didn't feel like a phantom limb. And maybe we are defining motherhood too narrowly. We're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Culture. Alysa grew up in a Chinese-American home with a father defined by exile and a grandmother who crossed oceans. That instills specific values: discipline, endurance, academic rigor. Combine that with being a biracial girl in a California sport built for white skaters. That identity is stacked with layers, and layers create armor. You can't capture that resilience in a TV highlight. So when she returned to the ice and stood at the Olympics in 2026, you weren't looking at a girl with a hole in her heart. You saw a complete person. But that integration isn't magic. It's constructed, and that construction took a village the cameras ignored. There is one final layer. The part that lives in how we react when a family breaks the mold. That reaction reveals our insecurities, not hers. The question keeps coming up, but not because the facts are missing. They aren't. Alysa Liu, anonymous egg donor, gestational surrogate. Father Alysa Liu, raising 5 kids in California. Mary stayed the legal guardian post-divorce. Grandma Shu was the anchor for years. None of this is classified. So why the obsession? Because people aren't confused about biology. They are uncomfortable with the narrative gap. Look at that image from Milan, February 2026. Gold medal, arena lights, Arthur sobbing in the stands. It's cinematic. It's clean, but clean stories flatten the truth. The headline became "Devoted Single Father Builds Olympic Legend." That stat sheet, it barely scratches the surface. You have to look past the highlight reel to see the engine really driving this machine. American sports media is obsessed with cookie-cutter narratives. They want heroes, villains, and easy labels. The psycho stage dad, The self-sacrificing soccer mum, the tyrant, the saint, easy to package, easy to sell. But when a family breaks the mold, the camera doesn't know where to look. There is no script for a mother figure scattered across a dozen different people. No mum in the stands for the reaction shot. The crowd panics. They see a void where they expect a face. But love isn't about geography. It's about impact. Rewind to 2019. Alysa shatters records. Youngest US champion in history at just 13 years old. The world went crazy. Microphones in her face. The weight of a nation on her shoulders. The heat turned all the way up. Right when she hit the stratosphere, the ground beneath sports was shifting. We finally started talking about the mind, not just the body. 2 years later, Simone Biles walks away in Tokyo. The whole conversation about pressure exploded nationwide. Alysa was living in the eye of that hurricane. She hits the brakes in 2022, right after Beijing stepping out of the arena. That wasn't a coincidence. It was a statement. A new generation claiming their lives back in a world finally ready to listen. Walking away at 16 wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a collapse. It was pure, unfiltered control. And you don't make a move like that if you're broken inside. You do it when you are rock solid. Let's talk about the architect of that foundation. Arthur escaped the turmoil in China, built a life from scratch in the States, law degree, immigration expert. The man is made of steel. That survival instinct bled into the walls of their home. Discipline, vision, no shortcuts. But rules alone don't build a soul. Usually that kind of pressure cracks a kid. But Alysa, she didn't crack. She walked away, conquered mountains, and came back swinging. That is not fragile. That is fierce. That kind of guts comes from deep roots. Maybe it was Mary quietly holding it down in the early days. Maybe it was Shu, the daily rhythm, the comfort food. Or maybe it was knowing the absolute truth about her birth since she was 8. Could have been the crew at UCLA, giving her a life outside the rink. It was all of it. And that is where the critics get it wrong when they ask, who is her real mum? They want one name. She has a village. Genetics anonymous donor. Carried by a surrogate, raised legally by Mary, nurtured daily by her grandmother. Coaches stepped up as emotional pillars. Culture wrapped around all of it. That is not a void. That is an army. But you can't squeeze an army into a catchy headline. No cinematic tearjerker close-up. So the media took the easy route and the world bought the cheap version. But the real story was happening off camera. And there is a jagged pill we need to swallow here. We are still freaking out about surrogacy and donors. It messes with our old-school definition of what a family looks like. Even in 2026, people still think mother equals biology. Alysa's existence smashes that rule. And honestly, she seems perfectly fine with it. The problem isn't her, it's the audience. And here is the final twist. She hits that Olympic podium, cameras flash. Dad's crying. Gold shines. But you can't photograph a village. Real support builds steel spines. It builds a girl who can quit at 16 and come back a legend. It builds a champion who doesn't feel the hole everyone keeps looking for. That is the raw, beautiful reality. She didn't lack a mother figure. She just didn't need one standing in the spotlight to validate it. She wasn't searching for a ghost. She was building an empire on solid ground. So when you look back at that viral Olympic shot, ask yourself, are you focusing on the empty space, or can you finally see the invisible crowd holding her up? I want to know what you think. Did her story feel incomplete to you? Or was it just a different kind of masterpiece? Sound off in the comments. And if you want the truth behind the headlines, smash that subscribe button.